Hi there, welcome back to our Python for Beginners playlist. In this video, we will cover built-in functions. These are functions already defined within Python. From the previous video, we learned that functions are reusable blocks of code that perform a particular task. And defining a function means creating it, while calling a function means using or running that function. So all functions need to be defined first before they're called, but since built-in functions are already defined, we just need to learn how to call them. So in this video, we will learn how to call and pass arguments to built-in functions. We'll also cover how to store the results in variables, and then lastly, we'll learn about methods. So without further ado, let's learn how to call functions. So to call functions, you need either of the following syntax. You have the name of the function, followed by parentheses if the function doesn't take any arguments. Or if it does take arguments, then inside the parentheses, you will have the different arguments. So arguments are values or data that a function can take. In other words, arguments are inputs you can give or pass to a function. Some functions don't take any arguments, some take only a specific number of arguments, while others take as many arguments as you can give them. When there are multiple arguments, each argument should be separated by a comma as seen right here. However, you don't need to memorize specific details for each function because most functions are pretty well documented, so you can just Google away. Now, let's think about our dishwasher example from the previous video. The soap, dishes, and even the water that's connected to the dishwasher can be considered arguments. So if we did have a dishwasher function in Python, then calling it would look something like this. So I'm just going to simply name it dishwasher. We'll type the name here, dishwasher, and then I'll open parentheses, and we'll start with soap, then comma. We'll do the first dish, just name it dish 1, the next dish, dish 2, dish 3, and I'll just end here because I'm lazy, but you can add as many arguments as you need to put there. So I won't run this because it'll give us an error because it's not a real function, but we can take a look at some real examples now. We'll start with the print function, which is probably the most used function out of all of them. When doing most tutorials, the print function is the first code that people usually see. So what does it do? Well, the print function displays its arguments to the screen. If this sounds familiar, this is similar to the way that our cells work in Jupyter. However, Jupyter only displays the last output in a cell. This is why we've been writing most code in separate cells, but now we can use the print function. Yay! So let's see this in action. Let's say we had 1, 2, 3 on different lines. Let's run this. So we only see the final output 3, but we don't see 1 and 2. But now let's use the print function. Say we have print, the first argument is 1, then next print, that is not print, print, and then 2, and for the last one, we can just leave it as 3 because Jupyter is going to take care of that. So now let's run that, and we'll see all of our output, 1, 2, and 3. The print function is one of those crazy functions that takes any number of arguments, including no arguments at all. So if we have no arguments, that would be print, parenthesis. Let's run that. We'll see that it produces a blank line. And I know this doesn't seem exciting, but you can use this to create space between other print outputs for readability, especially if you have a ton of outputs. Now, with multiple arguments, for example, print 1, 2, 3, to run that, it prints them all in one line with some space in between them. So the print function can be useful for debugging long code in one cell, especially for checking semantic errors because you can print any output that you want. It can also be used for information. For example, in our rock, paper, scissors game, the print function can be used to display game stats to whoever is playing the game. Now, another really useful function is the max function. The max function gives us, or in technical terms, returns the largest argument out of the arguments given. So this requires at least 2 arguments, because what's the point of getting the max of one argument, right? It's just that argument. So for example, we can say max and then 1, 2, 90. And I'll stop saying comma after each argument because I think you probably get it now and it's probably annoying. So I'll stop. And let's run that. And we get 90 as expected. So there's a min function as well that gets the smallest argument out of the ones given. And it works the exact same way. It's just spelled min instead. But I think this should be good enough examples to get a gist of how functions are called. We'll learn more Boolean functions in future videos because we're going to use them a lot. Now, let's look at how to store the outputs that functions return. Functions always return a value or data, and that value or data can be stored in a variable to be used elsewhere. Now, let's see an example. We'll name our variable max value, and we'll store our max function here as a max of 2 and 4. So Python will first evaluate the max function here and produce a 4 and then store that 4 in max value. So let's run that. And let's see if the variable has the value of 4. Yep, got the value of 4. So I could have put this in one cell, but I want to show you something about the print function. So let's do the same thing. We'll store it in a variable named output. And let's say print 5, for example. Let's run that. We'll see that the print function does its thing. It displays 5 to the screen. And when we see what's in output, we'll see that it's looks like there's nothing in there. So although the print function displays its input to the screen, this is not what it returns to us. It kind of just slaps that value on the screen and seems to give us nothing back. I say it seems to give us nothing back because it actually returns a value called none, which represents nothingness in Python. So to actually see this, we have to tell Python to print that value to the screen. So if we say print and then output, run that, we'll see here that we've got none. So this is an actual data type in Python. So there are other functions that also return none, and we'll learn more about what return means when we create functions in the next video. Now, I have an important note for you when it comes to naming variables. Notice that I did not name my variables the same as my functions because that would overwrite the functions. This also applies to any other already reserved names in Python. One way you can easily tell without knowing all of the reserved names is a color and style change when you type in the name. Variables should just be plain black or whatever color this is. And reserved names are different colors. For example, functions here are green. So I decided to mention this here instead of back then when we learned about variables because I thought it would be easier to remember if you see an example. So let's see an example. I'll just scroll up a little bit here. Right, there we go. Let's use the print function here. So let's name our variable print and we'll store something simple like 5. And let's see if that worked. Yep, it worked. Now, let's try to use the print function the way that we're supposed to use it. And let's try to print 10 to the screen. Okay, yep, we get an error there because now this is no longer a function. This is a variable. So keep this in mind. Always try to avoid naming anything the same as the reserved names in Python. So check for that color change or any style changes there. Now, if you want to get back your functionality, you have to restart the kernel to clear everything that you've done and reset everything back. So let's do that. Let's restart the kernel. It's done. And let's run that now. It will print 10. So just keep that in mind. If you see anything unexpected or any errors when trying to use functions, this might be one of the reasons. Since functions return values, we can also pass functions as arguments to other functions. For example, we can print the max of 10 and 5. So what Python does is it first evaluates the max of 10 and 5, which is 10, and then it prints that to the screen. We can also have something like max of max, and we'll do 10 and 100. And for our second argument, we can have, let's try min this time, of maybe 40 and 50. And let's just add a third argument that's just a number. Let's do 5, for example. So if we run that, we get 100. So it will evaluate max of 10 and 100 first, which is 100, and then minimum of 40 and 50, which is 40, and then 5, and then get the max of those three numbers, which is 100 here. Now let's look at a special subset of functions called methods. Methods are functions that belong to or are specific to a particular data type or structure. So they're called a little differently. The syntax for these is your data and then dot, and the rest looks like a function call. So we have the method name and then parentheses, and if you have arguments, then you can have arguments in there as well. So I'll do a numeric example here using the asIntegerRatio method. So we're going to use 1.5, then we've got dot and asIntegerRatio and parentheses. It doesn't take any arguments here. So what this method does is it returns a pair of numbers that can be divided to give the value that we gave it. So let's run that. We get 3 and 2, and 3 divided by 2 gives us 1.5. So we'll see a lot of useful methods when we learn about strings and lists, but this is just about as exciting as it gets when it comes to numbers here. So this brings us to the end of our video. If this video was helpful, please like and subscribe. Next, we'll learn how to define our own functions. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.